Hi, everyone. Sorry, my
Welcome,
computer
Mr. Atherton.
rebooted. It finally rebooted, so. All right. Good to see everybody this morning. I know we have quite a long agenda today, so I'll call the meeting to order and we'll start with the agenda adoption. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, the meeting minutes. Bonnie, did you have any questions on it or updates? Anybody else have concerns or updates on the meeting minutes?
I just had a question on the School Board Association, and maybe I'm wrong. It shows a fee of $29,000 divided over 3 years. The number I remember is $6,000, and I don't remember if that was 1 year or total, but it had to do with the way it netted out against our membership fee. I just thought the number was different. And do you remember? I just don't remember what we actually paid. It was on our board agenda too.
Yeah, Bonnie,
I can explain also too, if that's helpful, Mr. Atherton.
yeah, go ahead. I remember there was this is what we already pay and it's X dollars more a year, but go ahead, Franklin.
So we currently pay about $6,700 for yearly updates. It would be about $9,000 a year total if we were doing this project in and of itself on its own. So it's really kind of a net of $3,000. So this year we just basically pay the additional $3,000, and then next year it'll be $9,000, and the following, and that's it. So it's like we're paying a total that would also encompass what we normally pay.
Okay, so the incremental is $3,000 a year, Franklin.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, because we've already been for numerous years paying about $6,700 for regular updates. So this is just an increase for the couple years of the project.
Okay, so I think we should say that in the minutes of what is the real cost, that the real net cost to the district is incremental. So 3 years, that is our total fee is $29,000, and the incremental cost for the updates is $3,000 a year, a total of $9,000.
I can do that because I built it into the abstract for the initial cost, so I can pull that semantics to Ms. Hauser. I'll make sure and update the minutes. Yes, ma'am.
Great.
All right, sorry, go ahead, Bonnie.
None for me. That was it.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, I do have one question. From the meeting minutes, we talked about the committees getting aliases. Do we have any update on that? I know it's in the minutes, but I thought I would ask just to see where we are with that, because I know that would help a lot with the School Boards Association and with others wanting to communicate directly with committees.
I'll pass it over to Kevin. Kevin, do we have any updates on the email aliases?
So I can say that we're just about ready to pull the trigger on that. We've communicated with the board chair and worked with our tech department to make sure that all of the protocols are correct. I know that we have a lot of questions about how to handle that in the event of future public records requests and how this relates to the OCS board members list as well. But Mr. Atherton, I think we're pretty close to being ready to pull the trigger and help you get those aliases or email groups up and running.
Yeah, Kevin, just for the future of information request, you could create a generic email address that never goes away that is a member of all the committees, and then you always have access, so you don't have to figure out which one goes to which, and you have all committees. Just a recommendation, because we've had to deal with it in the past. So.
And thank you. I know that there's been a lot of discussion in previous boards and previous iterations of staffing here. And so making sure that all of those interlocking dependencies are something that everyone fully understands going forward. It's one thing for us to do it sort of where we are with who we are today, making sure that this is always positive and always constructive is requiring us to be very planful and thoughtful about it. So thanks for your patience with that.
Excellent. All right, with that, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second? Oh, yeah. Motion to
changes.
approve with the modifications that Ms. Hauser requested. Second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passes. All right, the first thing we have on the agenda is coming from our School Boards Association manual project updates. And the first item is new policies, starting with policy 1100 governing principles. Who's going to take us through that really quick?
That would be me, Mr. Atherton, and then I'm going to take one step back up to just item number 4, because in item number 4, there's just a few questions the board does need to, and then we'll jump into the new policies. So just to sort of level set kind of where we are, this is the first set of policies that NCSBA has sent. They reviewed 14, 7 of them needed review for are new and are not currently in our manual, and 3 actually are there with red lines. So as they begun the process and reviewing it, there's just some things they wanted to ask from NCSBA as we move forward. And that's what was here in the abstract. So just kind of wanted to go through these and get y'all's your feeling on these questions and any kind of feedback before we jump into going policy by policy. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm sorry. I do remember these questions.
Cool.
I guess we'll
So
just go one by one.
Sure, perfect. So the first couple are more like stylistically. The first one is more of how the board is referred to in policy. So I guess the question is, how would you all like the board referred to? Board of Education, board. What the project leaders are saying is they just want consistency throughout the manual. So it's sometimes referred to in its full name, sometimes it's referred to in portion. Do you all have a preference of how the board is referred to in policy?
Neil, how is this normally done? It seems like it would be the proper name, but how is there any legal guidance on this?
No, I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think it's okay to have a few references to Board of Education. Generally, we just say board for brevity. I mean, typically you don't want to repeat Board of Education over and over 15 times in the same policy. It seems overly wordy. So I'm not really concerned about it legally. It's a style issue. If you, I guess NCSBA just wants to know, do you want to consistently use one term or the other? In my view, it's not, there's no legal implications. Often I'll see Board of Education the first time and then board afterwards as a sort of shortened version. But I think whatever you all prefer is fine.
Bonnie, do you have a preference?
Yeah, I don't have a preference. I'm with Neil. Usually you start by spelling it out and then you go brief, but it's weird with the policy. I don't care.
So based on that, I'd recommend that we use the Board of Education as a first time in a policy, and thereafter within the same policy just referred as board. And that way we have consistency that refers first time to formal and then the nomenclature of board, if that's acceptable, Bonnie.
Yeah, actually, I think what there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're saying the first policy says Board of Education, and after that, we don't spell it out. But what you're proposing is fine with me. I think what you're proposing is fine, makes sense to me.
Yeah, the only reason I was thinking that way is a lot of time people just go to search and find a policy versus starting at the first one and going forward. And that way there's just consistency.
Exactly. So yeah, that's fine.
Got it.
Right.
I will
Next.
make that note. Thank you. The second one is really just semantics and style. Sometimes board and superintendent are capitalized, sometimes they are not. Do you have a preference of what they should be? I assumed it was capitalized, both board and superintendent, but I wanted to ask.
Bonnie, you want them capitalized too? Yeah, let's have them capitalized. I think it makes it more formal.
Perfect. Thank you. Number 3 is all related to cross-referencing. So this is a big one. Cross-referencing between policies, as noted here. Some of it's consistent, some of it's not. It is a difficult thing, as they say, to maintain, but this is actually a good way to level set across all policies to cross-reference. So what they're looking for is confirmation that that's what we want to do or not.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to reliably cross-reference. If we don't have it well done, than having it as misleading. And what I like about our policies is that there's a lot of detail in the table of contents. So, which should help alleviate the need for cross-referencing. So I'm really okay with do it where it comes up, but not require it. That's kind of where I am.
So the request, frankly, if I understand, is do we want to keep the cross-referencing? So if it's there, do we keep it or not? And it sounds like, Bonnie, you're saying yes for the ones that need it. Is that correct?
Oh, the ones that have it. I'm saying I don't trust that we can keep up with the cross-referencing reliably.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to do, but so I'm happy to relax that requirement. But I'll go however you want to go, Will, but that's my feeling. It's daunting task to me. But maybe Kevin has a comment, and Franklin, on how hard that is to do.
I was just going to ask not to defer or bring Neil into this, but if a policy is specifically named and cross-referenced above in the body of a policy, in other words, if I'm in policy 1 and it refers to policy 2, it's already linked there.
Right.
Do you need anything more than those explicit links, or is that sufficient for the cross-referencing that these policies envision?
Yeah, you read my mind, Kevin. That was exactly what I was going to say. I think you do have internal cross references in the body of policies in some cases because it's important to point people to another policy that's already there, and those are hyperlinked. So that I think I would not remove those. This question is about the list at the bottom, and I agree with Bonnie. It's very hard to keep up with that. Now, NCSBA, as long as you have their service, they'll update the cross references in the semi-annual updates, but any local policies that you do, that's going to be on staff and attorneys to go check. Are there any cross references? If we change the numbering, we're going to have to go back and check them. And I do worry that, it's just sort of setting ourselves up for a mistake, and that we're purporting to have comprehensive cross references, but I find it difficult to keep up with.
Yeah, I agree with that. If it's within the policy, then it's easily linked and updated as we go through. But having something at the bottom and trying to determine if it's still relevant or not as stuff updates, I don't know how we can maintain that or reasonably keep it accurate. Are you okay with that approach, Bonnie?
Absolutely. So yes, absolutely. It's in our discretion. It's discretionary. It's not something that we're representing that's comprehensive.
All right. So based on that, Franklin, it sounds like we're good with the referencing within the policy, but no need to have the bottom reference that we don't have a firm way to maintain across all the policies.
Got it. Noted. Thank you. Because what they did reference is that they're like, well, we'll give you one shot when we complete the project, and the one project will be done. So from that moment on, like we drive the car off the lot, it loses its value. So moving on to number 4, this one is related to. Yes, sir.
Just to be clear, if a policy already has it stated at the bottom, are you saying maintain it or strip them all?
Remove.
Good, got it.
Thank you for the clarity, Dr. Merrill. And then the last question in this first part was related to the naming of the policies. In some places there's double, and in some places there's triple. So what NCSBA is asking for is, what is your preference? It's just to list them by the first number and just have policies or regulations by one number, or have additional codes on them.
Just for a little context on that, so you all are aware, the NCSBA will often have the same policy will have 2, 3, sometimes 4 different numbers, because the same policy will appear in different series. So for example, non-discrimination on the basis of disabilities, they would list that under the student series and the employee series because it applies to both. So in some cases, I think you kind of have to do it that way, right? Or maybe you don't have to, but it makes sense. People are not going to go looking for employee policies in the student section. But there is no legal rule about it, or any rule that you are I don't know. I think to me, it's something that you could look at on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes, like the example I just cited, I do think it's important to have it listed in both series for clarity. In other cases, I think NCSBA is just kind of errs on the side of caution, and they'll assign things multiple policy numbers, and it's really not important. So there's no legal rule as long as it's in the policy manual, but that's the issue.
Yeah, thanks for that, Neil, because I was wondering about the multiple numbers on the policy. I had no idea what it meant. Now I know what it means. So thank you for that. I didn't find it helpful. I mean, it wasn't intuitive unless we have an explanation there. I don't mind knowing. It's good information, but unless we tell people we're doing that, I don't know if it's intuitive, but I don't have a strong opinion on it.
Yeah, I think, based on what you're saying, Neil, I think it's important to have it so people can find it. And maybe, Bonnie, to your point, maybe we should consider as a committee having an FAQ section.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
hey, I noticed there's four numbers up there. What does it mean? This is, reference for, employees or others, just to help, because I'll see if I could come up with some FAQs and see as a starter to help.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I would add, it'd be like more like how to use this, because the online searching and all that would be really helpful.
Okay.
That's a great idea.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is keep it where on a case by case basis where it's necessary, especially like in the case that Neil referenced. But if not, we try to keep it to one, and then looking at an FAQ section that will help to guide people on how to use it, because there's a lot of actual functions within Public Policy Manual. Hyperlinking, Word documents, PDFs. The search function is, for all listening public, is a phenomenal tool. I use it very consistently. So yes, we can work on that as well.
Okay.
Okay. And then wrapping up this one, I just want to confirm, it was one of the two attachments on these was the sequencing of going through policies. So what NCSBA offered was start at 1,000, work through 9,000. But they did say that's a board decision. So I wanted to get your thoughts on sequencing after they complete the 1,000 series.
Yeah, I don't have a personal preference. Bonnie, do you?
Oh, don't care. That's fine.
So they can continue as they were going, section by section, in order.
All right. So I think that gets through most of them. The other set that was on there was just a tentative schedule for the next 2.5 years. They did make sure and reference that, and appreciative that they got the first set to us now. They are, of course, wrapped up in the law conference, and then they have the next regular annual conference. So the next one's maybe I think they said not to expect one in December, but a November one. So just to sort of level set the playing field. So that other document was just a tentative schedule for the next 2.5 years. All right, well, that gets us through that first set. Thank you all. So we'll roll into the new policies, and we'll start with policy 1100. And I did want to just give a quick background on what 1100 is. Like I said, the first three here, A through D, don't exist in manual. And the first one is a governing policies, and this doesn't have, as NCSBA has mentioned, doesn't have substantive content. They're just a list of policies in the manual that correspond to each of the governing principles. We don't have this one, so it's an option for us to add or not. And they included it in this initial set. And if we'd like to, they can clean up and add it in as well. So that's what this first one is here, the governing principles.
I guess I have a guiding question for us. And are we trying, to the extent possible, stay consistent with the School Boards Association, or are we trying to be more Orange County schools? We try. I mean, on a wash, do we use theirs? If it doesn't matter, or do we try and customize it to us?
I don't mind giving you my thoughts on that question. As the board's attorney, I think the board's policies need to reflect the board's preferences about policy, and I have no problem when you deviate from NCSBA at any time for any reason, whether it's tone or content. That said, you get some economies and efficiencies the more you track the NCSBA policies. So it's just something that's up to you all entirely in your judgment and discretion. It's easier to keep up with the policy manual with the semi-annual updates if you're exactly the same as NCSBA, but that should not stop you from having the policies you want and need.
Yeah, Neil, I agree. We often deviate from what the School Boards Association has, but I think the advantage is even with customizations, what we see is when they make an update because of legal changes or clarifications, those come to us with a red line that we can choose to accept what they've added, or in most cases, what I've seen is we tweak it to match what makes sense for Orange County. For example, this policy, which talks about governing principles for the board, although this is a good start, for example, I would prefer to see item 6, removal of barriers, to say equity, and to have barriers as one of the descriptions of that versus it being that. The other one I would add to this one is culturally diverse and rich environment as an item listed out as like number 8, and the describe celebrating, our diverse cultures and backgrounds and everyday learning, for example. Those, for example, would be the ones that, once I read this, would be the ones to me to recommend for Orange County versus their generic version.
It's so funny, Will, because I had the same notes, but the other idea is for us to put the strategic plan goals in here instead of the School Board Association, right? Because I'm just throwing an idea out. I also, on top of the ones that you were, like terms like illegal, we prohibit illegal discrimination is really different than saying we embrace diverse cultural, diversity, cultural enrichment and so something that really characterizes that we seek that, we don't prohibit illegal we're way before prohibiting illegal discrimination. We really embrace diversity. It's so different. Also, we're more than an inviting environment. We want an inclusive environment where students feel welcome and are excited about learning. And so just a different tone.
Yes.
That I read here. So do we want to hash this, or do we want to just insert our strategic plan goals?
I would, what I think would make sense is coming back with a revision of this where it matches kind of the recommendations, Bonnie, and that way we can see an updated version of this, because I agree. As I read through this, I had the same thought that many of the things listed here is in our strategic plan with more specific details, or it's broken out in 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And I think this should reflect, as people ask, what are the guiding principles of the district, the board, you can go to this and see it. So I don't know if we should make it exactly the strategic plan, but I think the key elements of the strategic plan would be included, or it wouldn't be our very strategic plan, right?
Right. Yes, the missions and values part, right? That's what the guiding principles really are. The missions and values of the strategic plan is kind of that's what governing that those technically are our governing principles. This in a way contradicts it. So you want to go ahead and change this? You want to put in edits to this?
Yeah. I would like to do edits and like I said, bring something back, because I know, with just the ones you and I mentioned, there needs to be updates to the verbiage, and also I think once seeing it updated, it may stimulate some other ideas as well. Because there's
right.
no rush in getting this to the full board because, this is very important. And I think having it thoughtfully done is going to mean less work at the board level than
Okay.
us sending something very quickly to them.
Okay, so maybe in the preamble at the beginning to say something about our full governing principles are described in the board strategic plan. In the mission and values in the strategic plan, and just put a reference to that. I would on number 3, make it safe, orderly, and inclusive environment. And then where staff and students feel welcome and can fully focus on and be excited about learning. So and you had some words on number 6.
Yeah, I wanted to change it instead of being removal of barriers. I think that's where we say equity, and then have like you said, the system of excellent schools embracing our diverse cultures and student population, families, etc. But removing barriers put into the paragraph somewhere versus having it as a title, because I think that's one of our key elements is removing barriers for our students and families versus it being one of the governing principles, if you will.
Yeah.
And
So,
then
yeah.
and the only other one that I had, Bonnie, like I said, is like putting a number 8 that talks about culturally diverse and rich environment, and then having a description of that, talking about celebrating our diversity, our diverse backgrounds and cultures, and everyday learning. Obviously I'm not stuck on the wording of that, or if there's more description around that, I'm definitely open to it. But that, I just wanted to have thoughts on paper to start the conversations.
Okay, so is number 6 more about the people and number 8 more about the environment that we're creating to embrace them? Is that how? Because I'm wondering about combining them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like they're slightly different, right? Like you're saying, equity meaning, more about the barriers and inclusion. And to me, the culturally diverse environment is talking about bringing those backgrounds of everyone and the different perspectives and sharing that, and including that in everyday learning, which could be, a lesson plan, or students sharing, their experiences and their family customs and things they do. So that's how I'm separating them out. But
Yeah, so it's possible to combine them, but it has some words that I wrote, and I put it under 6. It can go, it may fit better under 8. But a system of excellent schools embraces diverse cultural and economic and personal qualities, and seeks to eliminate barriers to learning and development. So it's kind of the idea that we are intentionally diverse. Our students are diverse. We're intentionally diverse, or we want to embrace that. But so it covers both. I just don't know. That's all. It covers both. And then we prohibit discrimination. Illegal is unnecessary, right? We pursue and harassment of students and staff, encourage tolerance and respect. I don't like the word tolerance. I feel like we've moved so far past that. Encourages respect for all cultures and preferences, because I want to capture our LGBTQ kids in there, and seeks to eliminate or lessen lessen barriers that may impede a student's ability to learn. It's actually, I like the economic disadvantages, poor nutrition, ill health, lack of transportation. I may want to put in there cultural stereotypes.
Yep.
Have I confused you completely? I'm kind of rambling here. I'm just kind of making it up as we go.
So I'd recommend, Neil, if this makes sense, for both of us to just email the wording, and then that way it can be incorporated. Because I think us trying to do it in real time is not going to
good
be
idea.
effective.
Good idea.
And then I'd recommend too us copying Anne as well, and that way she can see what we're doing. But again, let's make sure we're not having a conversation about it, but more here's input for changes. Neil, do you have any concerns with the items we've discussed?
No, not at all. And this is an entirely philosophical policy. So I think it makes sense, rather than staff or I trying to capture your thoughts, let's get your red lines. But my only note of caution is we can't have an email exchange with how about this, how about that, right? So it'd have to be your individual edits sent to staff and me. We'll try to maybe combine them if feasible. If not, we'll come to you and say, you're
right. Here's the wording. Here's the wording.
Exactly. Which of these do you like? Let you make the call. But if we start with your words, that I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Excellent.
Good.
And if we could send those, Bonnie, no later than say Wednesday of next week, that way they can have time to draft it.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll get them out as soon as I can, probably today. Neil, and I'm going to put some words together. I think you understand philosophically who we are and what we're doing. So I give you no need to use the words exactly, no need to stay true to my words. So just giving you leeway to say, let me put this together in a way that makes.
Appreciate that. I just don't want to go out on a limb. So we'll stick with your philosophy as much as we can. The board's.
All right. Next is Title I and family engagement.
Yeah, I love this. I'm not sure we're compliant with it. And so I don't know if we hold it. I mean, there are a lot of things, especially in the notice requirements, that I felt, but even there were things in it that I felt like we're not doing. And so I don't know what to, do we, what do we do about that? Do we let staff take a look at it and say, how does this, because once we make it policy, what do you do to make sure we're compliant with it?
So Dr. Merrill, your thoughts on this? This is so Bonnie, just to bring us back to the original, this is like you said, a new policy, and definitely we want to make sure input from the district and thoughts about how we're doing it now. What would it take if we're not doing some of these? Because we definitely want to make sure we're following what we say we're going to do. But Dr. Merrill, do you have thoughts on this one?
Yeah, we did an initial crosswalk with CNI and Title I, but I think it would, and there's some matchup with what we're doing, but I think it needs a tight screen against our practice and what we can deliver. So I would say, let us grab this because it is new to us.
Yes.
Let us grab this and mark it up some, and then bring that back to you guys and show you the disconnects.
Okay. And I think the other thing, Dr. Merrill, that may help too, is not only the disconnects, what resources would be required to do that, right? Some of these are very explicit on what the schools would have to do, how they would have to engage. And I think they're very good, like Bonnie said, but I want to make sure we're realistic and we have the funding to support what we're stepping up to do.
We would do that and we'd say, got you, I got it.
Okay, so
Mhm.
let's bring this back with the action item for Dr. Merrill and team to come back with their perspective of what we aren't meeting today and what the impacts would be.
Yeah, I do have one add to it. If it's, I'd like to add a provision that says the school system will provide the board with an annual report on Title I schools and English language learners, showing us, student progress and showing the overall program and including student progress. So I would like to get a report once a year on what's happening with our Title I schools and our English language learners. So just a thought. What do you think about? It's not in the policy.
Well, there's one that talks about the system report card, right? Which talks about how each school is doing. And it also shows aggregate, disaggregate category of student achievement, graduation rates, performance. So there's that section of the report card covers, I think, what you're asking for, Bonnie, unless there's a specific metric that's missing from that section.
Yeah, this is what we do today. I read this as well. We don't include, doesn't have performance measures on school climate and safety as available, and rate of enrollment in post-secondary education. I don't think we have any of that. But I was looking about something that was more an assessment of the program, student growth in our Title I schools, what's happening with our newcomers in our English language program and our English language learners, which, as you know, is a hot topic for me. So I'm looking for something a little bit richer that's more board-based. This is more like what we're already, and I don't know. So, I know when the kids get their report cards, it has the kids' grades against the school's grades against the district's grades. So we already provide a lot of that. I was looking for a real report to the board once a year. We get the Title I report on funding, but we don't get a report on how our Title I schools are doing.
Yeah, so Bonnie, can you articulate a little more? Because on there it says student achievement, and then there's an item that's kind of open-ended where I think would fit in some of the things you're saying, which are other school quality and or student success indicators. And many of the items you were talking about to me are success indicators that we would measure. But if you have a specific list, can you send those as items that you would like to be included? Or because it sounds, what you're asking for sounds similar to some of these items, or items that just aren't listed in this.
It includes some of it. I was looking for something a little bit more formal. And I'm just looking at this like C, we don't get C. That's an important part of so that would be included in the stuff that I'm saying. I was looking for a report that added this, but also talked about the number of students that are enrolled by, in every school. So it just kind of aggregates it in a report to the board, but I'll send you some notes.
Okay, yeah, because this says that it would be aggregate and disaggregated by the categories. So to your point, you would see it by our whole system and then by individual schools. But this is the section that made me concerned on what it would take for us to really do this, and what resources would be required to ensure we can consistently do this. So if you can send by Wednesday next week your items, so Dr. Merrill can look at those as well.
Sure.
And just
there
copy.
Okay, I'm happy to, and there are other parts of this that's not, there are other areas where I think we're out of compliance. Do you want me to send all my notes?
Well, so
Well,
I think, yeah, Bonnie, I think, Dr. Mel acknowledged that we don't have all these today, and that's one of the things he's going to do is go back and come back to us and say, here are the areas we're not doing today, and this is what it would take. But I want to make sure we capture items, not necessarily that we're not doing, but things you would like to see. So as he's doing that
Okay.
evaluation, he can say, okay, this one to be included, here's what it would take us to do as well.
Okay,
All right.
Mr. Atherton, before we move on, one suggestion I have for the administration as they review this policy is that I have not yet memorized all 680 some pages of the Title I regulations. So some of this may be legally required, some of it probably is not and is discretionary. And as staff are reviewing for feasibility, the footnoted versions of the NCSBA policies that are on the policy manual of their model policies will indicate which are legally required and which are not. So there's no point in, deleting something is unfeasible if it's legally required, and that'll be a helpful resource. And I'm also happy to consult on that as they review the policy.
Yeah, Neil, thank you for that. I completely agree. All right. All right, so comments on that by Wednesday to Dr. Merrill, copying myself and Neil. Okay, regulation code.
I'm sorry. Well, can I just, one other thing, and there's things in here that are that overlap with what we're trying to do with this, with SB 49. So I assume Kevin's looking, because there's a lot of things in here about family engagement. And when I go back to, I forget the policy number, the other policies that this, and I don't know. 1310, there's overlap between them, and I don't know. I just throwing that out there, just not sure how that's handled or how we're looking at that.
My understanding, Bonnie, is that the NCSBA is tackling SB 49 issues in policy 1310, and that's a broader policy that applies across the board. This is just limited to Title I's schools, so I don't think there will be a need to do SB 49 edits here, but we can certainly keep that in mind as we're reviewing.
Okay, all right, thanks for that, Neil.
All right. The next one is a new policy as well, responding to bomb threats.
I had.
All right, so
I just, yeah, well,
Go
I
ahead,
just
Bonnie.
had one question on it, and that's, are the principals prepped on, what is it, are the principals prepped on this? That was the only question I had. I thought I might have no comments on the policy itself. Look fine.
So, Dr. Merrill, it seems like this is, as I read it, these are things that based on some of the items we've been prepped on in the past, things we're doing, but now it's being documented. But are we confident and comfortable with the items that are listed, that we are meeting them? And I guess the secondary question I have is for you, Neil, afterwards, which is, given some of the safety and security and us keeping stuff closed session and less telling people line by line what we would do in a scenario, there seems to be a line here to me of being vague on purpose versus what we actually do in practice. So, that secondary question for you, Neil, will be, should some of this we, not keep in here, for example, the precautions section. But anyway, we'll get to that. But just Dr. Merrill, your thoughts first from Bonnie's question.
It's not unlike the prior policy where we now have to compare this to our practice and then look at what we need or want to comply with based on what's written, or modify the written based on a practice we can keep or do legally. Your point about limiting the public communication of our procedures is key. And so that's something Neil and I can work on that as well. So that the policy itself may be very high level and simplistic in the reg, which is more in-house, can have a lot of the detail to it. But we would need to do the same for this policy that we did prior.
Okay, so we'll definitely have this one brought back, Dr. Merrill, with y'all's feedback and guidance on some of the specifics. So Neil, your thoughts around some of this on the details?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, just from a quick review, I don't have any immediate concerns that this is oversharing. It's a good thing to be thoughtful of. I would absolutely not publish evacuation routes or anything like that. But to say that you should have an evacuation route in the policy is not overly sharing, in my view. But I would certainly want Dr. Merrill and other staff to weigh in on that before you decide. And also, I can tell you just from the legal references here, this is not a policy that you are required to have a policy on, nor is the content dictated by law. So it seems like a good idea to have a policy or procedure addressing bomb threats. But I do think you have some discretion here, staff and the board have ultimately discretion about how you want, what the content should read.
Neil, can I interject a question since you brought that up? So when the SBA does explicitly cross-reference general statute, what I heard you say is this policy isn't necessarily required by state law, but they are referencing something, and there's a lot in this policy that's holding the board to a very high level of accountability and schools to a very high level of accountability on, like you said, by its own initiative.
Right.
So what should we understand about those legal? I mean, I tend to check those cross references with general statute, but I'm curious if you can speak to that.
Absolutely, yes. Great question. The legal references don't necessarily mean that the statute cited requires a policy or dictates the content. They're just in some cases, for example, here 115C36 is just the general powers and duties of boards of education. It's sort of the source of authority for adopting the policy. 390.1 just says that you can have policies on student discipline and safety. So these are general authorizing statutes, but you wouldn't know that from just reading the legal references. What you need to do to figure out what's legally required is go to the footnoted version of the model policy. And they're very good about having footnotes that say this section is legally required. This section may be modified. This section is optional. So that's the only way to tell. And I'm also happy to consult,
Thank you.
Questions about that.
Okay, yeah, the only other comment I had on this policy besides concerns of just our details is under precautions, for example, it says call tracing capacity. The principal shall assess the feasibility of caller ID and other tracing. I have concerns with that being put at a principal level versus a district level. And we have buildings that have no schools, and who would manage that? So I even if we go forward with this, I think there's some items here that need to be rewritten that makes sense. Like, I don't think it's on the principals to have the IT enable that. And then what do you do for the welcome center or, some of our other buildings that don't have principals because people could call them and, just my thought around it. Kevin, do you have thoughts around this?
I think that would be, if we're looking at any of those crosswalks that Dr. Mellor has already referenced, this would be the easy low-hanging fruit for us to catch in a sweep like that. I was thinking the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. And then the lockable areas was the other one I saw that I was thinking through of. Not every place has closets. Are we now saying if there's a desk provided, it needs a lock? Or what happens if there's a room that doesn't have locks? Are we now saying there'll be lockers? So some of I don't want to have a policy for a policy's sake and then also have things in there that we realistically can't do or don't do today. So I guess to your point, Kevin, as we go through this, let's just be realistic on it. There are these things we can do. So I think with that, the recommendation is to bring this back to our next meeting and give the chance for the district to look at this and bring back some recommendations. And then Neil, if you can check for any legal requirements for this.
This is a regulation recommended by the school board. It's not a policy. And
Oh,
I
you're
don't
right.
have the policy for you here. I don't know if it can be pulled up. So we've got a lot of leeway with this regulation. I think it's suggested regulations for school systems. We should have married the policy to it also, but this is what came back from school boards. So I think we have a lot more freedom than a lot more freedom.
Agreed. None of this is legally required. It just seems like a good idea to have a protocol for bomb threats, but how you manage it is really up to the board.
Yeah, I will, you're right. I didn't see the R, but I can tell you, I'm personally not supportive of publishing how we're managing this.
Yeah.
I'm very concerned with doing that because it talks about, utilities and step by step, anyway, that's my personal view. Dr. Merrill, if your team can go through it and come back with a recommendation, I'm just very concerned with these protocols, given the environment we're in.
And I'll just, given that, Mr. Atherton, I'll just let you know, if you all prefer not to have this regulation at all, that's perfectly fine. Not everything needs to be in the policy manual necessarily. So again, it's a very good idea, obviously, to have set procedures for how
Yeah.
to handle bomb threats and other, serious incidents, but we don't need to publish them all in the policy manual. So it certainly could just be an internal protocol that's not published.
So Bonnie, what is your feeling on this? Because if you're depending on where you are,
I'm completely okay to pull it. I would love to put something in the overriding policy that explains that the school district maintains confidential security policies for our schools, which are reviewed every year with our principals, yada, yada, something like that. And just that it's our policy and it's our policy to keep it confidential. But something just says that we do it, we ain't giving it to you, but it's not a public policy. It's a security policy. I don't know if we could say something like that.
yeah, it would be a new policy. It wouldn't replace this, since this is a
Yes,
dash
I think
R.
there's an overarching policy. So drop this completely, but in the overarching policy to just explain what we do. That we're covering that the district provides. I forget what we call it, but we have a safety plan, a fairly elaborate safety plan, which includes this, doesn't it? Right, that's where it is. So I'd be completely okay on striking this and just saying something so the public knows we didn't leave it out. We do it. We're just not sharing it. We don't share it publicly.
I think that would be absolutely fine. It would also save staff some time going through this line by line, trying to edit. And from what I'm hearing from both of you is you just really don't want to overshare. That makes perfect sense. We don't need to have this regulation as long as the administration can report back to you. We've got a plan for bomb threats, but we're not going to put it on the website. I think that's totally fine.
Okay, so with that, the action item instead would be to bring back a higher level policy that just states that we do not share this, although this is reviewed confidentially each year.
Yeah, we have something we can name it. But we do it confident, I don't know, should we name it?
So can I ask a clarifying question? Because in section B, updates to existing policies is policy 1510, school safety, a red line version of it, which would be the overarching policy for this regulation. Am I hearing that at the pleasure of the board, the committee, to remove the regulation, not add this one, and add that additional language that you're referring to when we get to item A under existing?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we need to, Mr. Atherton, take a motion to say, no, we're not going to add regulation 1510, or we could just strike it here as committee?
I don't know, we need official action, but because this is a new one, unless this committee recommends and it goes to the board and goes through it, there's no action because it doesn't exist today. Correct, Neil?
That's correct. And also, I think we have a clear consensus from the committee at this point, not, that you don't want the regulation. We're going to go back and add a sentence, probably one sentence to the policy. We do need to talk about the policy. I don't know where that is on our list, but it's all posted here.
It's in the next section.
It's in the next section.
Okay.
But I just want to add clarity for anybody hearing. We do drills and very precise details on how we manage this. We are just not going to publish it to the general community or others. All right.
I think we should.
Mr. Atherton, I'm
Yes,
so sorry. Ms. Hauser, please go ahead and finish your thought.
No, go.
This is on a process related note, you all. I know that we're speaking about grave matters and some of them are very serious. Our interpreters have asked across the board for consideration. I'm one of the speakers who speaks too quickly for good interpretations. I'll call myself out here. And if we can all be conscious of our volume and our speed, I realize there's a lot on the agenda and I'm not going to take any more time because that would only harm the cause. But if we could be very deliberate, that will assist with our folks who are listening in Spanish and who'll watch this later in Spanish interpretation. Thanks, y'all.
thank you, Kevin. All right, Bonnie, did you have another comment?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, the next one. So we just to close it out, we're dropping this one and we'll have further discussions with the policy 1510. All right, policy 1610 through 7800 is professional and staff development. This is another new item. All right, Bonnie, do you have any?
I had no comment.
Yeah,
I had no comment.
yeah, I looked through it and it seemed appropriate and documented what I believe we're already doing. Dr. Merrill, do you have any concerns with this policy going forward?
No, I think we're okay on this.
Kevin, any concerns from you? All right. Then do we have a motion to bring this forward to the board for first reading?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Aye. All right, this policy for professional staff development will go to full board for first reading. Okay. All right. Now we're going to move to existing policy updates from the School Boards Association. First up is policy 1510. School safety.
Can you put it up, put the red line version up? I'm sorry, I didn't print it.
Are you able to see this? Just to ask. Ms. Hauser, are you seeing the policy or are you only seeing the agenda?
Yes, we can see
Now I can see it.
Let me know if you need me to zoom in.
Franklin, do you know what the yellow highlighting indicates versus the red line track changes?
No, I do not. That was sent to us directly from them as part of the updates.
Yeah. Okay.
I could see clarity on that, Neil, because I know when they were looking at it, they, as part of the project, they're looking for localized additions. So it could be that that's a former localized condition, but I'll see clarity from our reps at NCSBA.
So do we put something in the, are we proposing that we put something in the beginning that just says Orange County Schools maintains, actively maintains a school safety plan, which is reviewed with law, I think that's buried in here someplace, but that's reviewed with law enforcement and blah, 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 and is tested annually with every school, something like that. Is that what we're looking for?
Yes. So there's different sections within that. So section 5 is, or D number 5, planning for emergencies and conducting fire drills or other emergency drills. Maybe after that first paragraph, So this is page 3, Franklin.
Yeah, can you scroll down, Frank? Frank, I'm sorry, my internet is too slow. I didn't.
I got, no worries, I got you.
Okay, go down to where we can see number 5. Okay, you see, yeah, right there where it says the board in coordination with local law enforcement, emergency management service will adopt risk management plans related to incidents of school violence for each of the schools. I mean, that we could change the wording of school violence to, various school incidents, and then say, as a district, we do not publish, after that period, as a district, we do not publish our specific plans, although they are reviewed yearly. And I think that covers, Bonnie, what we
Okay.
originally said, but just wanted to see if that's your thoughts as well.
Yeah, that's fine. I was thinking about doing it more broadly, I guess but that's fine. That works for me. And I like that the policy had a reference to anonymous tip line, so that was cool. But yeah, that's fine. Well, that works for me.
Okay. So who would update this? Is this Neil? Would you update this, or?
Sure, happy to. I get the concept here. It's pretty straightforward, and rather than taking the time to come up with the exact wording and where to put it, if you'd like, I can bring this back next meeting with probably just one sentence or a phrase or two inserted in this section.
Okay, and there's one other area that I would like us to add more to. There is where is that? Okay, under between page 2 and page 3. Okay, for this section where it's in yellow, where it says, for the purpose of this policy, reasonable force is used to use of the limit physical contact or restraint to the extent necessary to reestablish safe environments. Employees shall follow any additional instructions or guidance from supervisors in implementing this policy. I would like to see more wording around EC students and how we address to ensure when restraint is going to be used on our students of special needs, that there is more than just someone going to restrain them. It really needs to be someone that understands the situation, has de-escalation, that we are not just going and grabbing a student that this doesn't need to be done for. So Neil, if you can help craft some wording around that, where
Sure. And I think what we could do, Mr. Atherton, is just I'm sure there's another policy on seclusion and restraint that was going to be very detailed on that, because that is tightly legally regulated. So I would suggest a internal cross-reference here with the hyperlink.
Perfect. I just worry when somebody reads this, and we are very thoughtful around our diverse population. The only other thing I had in this policy, and I know that it may not follow this specific policy, but I know that many people have heard me bring this up in regular board meetings, and Neil, I'd like some guidance where this would go. But since we're talking about school safety, one of the things that I hear about and we continuously learn is, again, our EC students that go to a camp after school, a summer program within the district, are not given the information about the specific needs or accommodations our students need. And I want to make sure that we have this in policy, that that's going to happen, because it's occurred enough for me to be frustrated enough to want to have that somewhere in policy, whether it's this policy or, Neil, if you recommend another, that one, we ensure that the confidential records are maintained, but the information necessary for accommodations or items that our EC students require are notified to any of our camps, our summer programs, after school, et cetera. But again, maintaining the confidentiality of records. So I definitely don't want this to be, they're going to copy the records and hand them to them, but I would, like a recommendation back on what that would look like. Dr. Merrill, do you have any concerns with something like that being put into one of our policies?
No, makes sense. I could see it showing up in after school program guidance. Don't know if it'd be a regulation or part of policy, but when you start talking about summer camps and this and that, you're crossing a lot of entities. So it could be a little tricky to be sure we're covered in all directions, but I get your meaning. We can take a look at that. So
Yeah.
I think to rephrase, to be certain I'm clear, whatever adult is working with the kids needs to understand any, if, and what the accommodations need to be, but in a confidential manner.
Exactly. You're spot on, Dr. Merrill. It
Okay.
is to ensure the confidentiality of the students, and two, to ensure the supervisor or supervision of that is aware of the situation and can ensure the proper training or supervision or any other items, whether it's medical or accommodations for the students for the activities of the day. We'll know that. And you're spot on that there's so many different items we have, and that's why I feel like it's so important for us to have that. All right. Any other comments on school safety or that? So I would recommend, based on this, that an update be brought back to the committee with the recommended changes. Any concern with that?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so that one will come back to committee.
Mr. Arthur, just want to make one quick note here. I'm bringing it over. This is an attachment under item 4. I just want to draw attention to this. This is a chart that comes from NCSBA as part of the work, and they detail everything that they made changes to or referenced, so you can see some of that additional content and background under each one of the policies. So I'll just pull up. This is the work that they brought in as part of 1510. So just so you can see where they reference some of the changes. I will still see clarity on what the yellow means, but every policy has this little additional work, and this is under the Orange County 1000 chart, which is an attachment under item number 4.
Okay, yeah, I did see this, and I've seen this before, that they've provided as part of their here's the new ones or updates that we do. And I think they used to do that quarterly, if I remember right, they would release it that way.
Yeah, these are also part of the regular policies, leads of schools, or AKA PLS updates, is they give you these, correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, but it's good content to understand the changes.
Yeah, and the hopes is when we have those reflector emails that the full committee will see these as well as they come out.
Yes, sir.
All right. Moving along, our next one is policy 1730, non-discrimination on the basis of disability. All right. Okay, Bonnie, do you have any comment?
I had no comments. It looked fine to me. I had no comments on it.
So Dr. Merrill, did we have any feedback from Connie's team on this, or any concerns with the changes?
No, I'm not certain they've seen it. I need to push it over and be certain.
Okay, I would prefer that if it them get a chance to review it before it goes to the board. Are you
Agreed.
okay with that, Bonnie?
Yeah, if you look at it, they're pretty minor. I think it just changes the standard, but yeah, that's fine. There's not any substantive changes to the policy.
Yeah,
It's just that it changes the standard. But yeah, sure, that's fine with me.
And Mr. Atherton, it just occurred to me that your comments about on the last policy about notifying making sure that staff at after-school programs, et cetera, are notified about students with disabilities. This might be a good policy to put that in, or perhaps in both. The safety policy, I get that there's a safety implication in some cases, medically fragile students. It could be unsafe not to inform staff in an after-school program of the disability. Child could be injured, but I think it might also fit here. So maybe that's something we could take a look at.
Okay,
I like that. I like that idea. It's more than non-discrimination. It's support for this, but anyway, I like the idea.
okay, that's an excellent recommendation, Neil. If we can make sure that as staff reviews this, they're aware of that request for that wording and changing. Neil, if you can just facilitate making sure they have that. All right, we'll bring this one back to the next meeting for a second reading. Okay, next one is policy 1740, student and parent grievance procedures. And there's a few changes in this one.
Yeah, I didn't have any, I was fine with it.
Yeah, I didn't have any issues with this one either. Dr. Merrill, did the staff have a chance to review this and have any concerns?
I do not, but I've not fine-tooth combed it. Don't know if, this is so procedural, it usually kicks back to the attorney to be certain we're checking all boxes, but.
Yeah, I don't have any legal concerns here, and I think most of these seem like just good clarifications and sort of bringing your policy into alignment with the NCSBA policy, which has benefits for future updates. It's just going to be easier to keep track of the legal references, et cetera. So I don't have any concerns about any of this.
Okay, I'd recommend moving this forward. A lot of it seemed to just be clarity, and I think there's not any issue I've heard to warrant bringing it back. Bonnie, are you okay with moving this forward to the board for first reading?
That's fine with me. You want a motion?
Yes.
Motion to move this forward.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, this one will go to full board for first reading.
Okay, and then that one gets us through all the updates as part of the manual project. I will continue to keep that semantics when we do policy committee, so we're always clear when we're looking at policies that are part of the project versus a localized one. We will now move into localized policies we've been working on consistently since the last one, starting with, looks like 1761 whistleblower.
Yes, very excited to see this one come back with the updates. Bonnie, do you have comments or?
Yeah, I have one, and I want to, Neil, thank you for inserting something on confidentiality. At the end of the day, it reads like, well, try and keep you confident, keep you confidential, but we really can't. That's how and I wonder if there's the bottom line is that if somebody is whistleblowing, they need to feel protected. Especially if you're whistleblowing against your boss or your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss. And so this says, I don't know if I'm reading this correctly, but it says within Orange County Schools, we'll keep you confidential. We will keep this confidential, but if it goes to the courts, we may not be able to do that. That's kind of what I'm reading. Is that correct?
Yes, that's more or less correct. And I did give a lot of thought. I heard from the last meeting that you all wanted to see as much confidentiality as you could promise. And, thinking about it carefully, I just think it's important not to overcommit. And in fact, there was a recent case that went to the Court of Appeals where a judgment against a school board, I think it was almost $1 million, was upheld because a board member had promised to someone that something would be kept in strict confidence. They shared personal information, litigation ensued. The person that it all came out in discovery in the litigation, and there was a lawsuit against the board for for promising confidentiality and then breaching the privacy of the person. So I just think it's important not to overcommit, and I just couldn't think of a way to insulate against legal process, subpoenas, court orders. I mean, it's possible that this stuff could come out. And I think that would be unusual, but I just didn't feel comfortable with an ironclad confidentiality guarantee.
Yeah, I think what you've written makes sense, Neil. The only clarity, I think, I don't know, we need to write it physically in here, but it doesn't mean that if we get a subpoena, we wouldn't fight it, right? It just means that we may be legally required, even after, trying to fight a subpoena. We may say, hey, we're going to fight this subpoena, and then we get overwritten. We don't have a choice. So I think it's better to say there are scenarios that we can't. But one of the wording I would like to have changed is on page 3 on the confidentiality, where it's talking about the board attorney, where it says who may contact the board attorney. I think it should say who shall, as the comment says, because I want to make sure that we're not putting people in the district in the positions of making a legal decision on something as important as confidentiality, that there must be, a discussion with the attorney. And that way we ensure, have we done everything to protect this? And the attorney can then update the board, obviously, on why we have to proceed in a certain way, especially given the confidentiality was one of the most important parts for us. So I'd recommend that be changed to the shall.
Yeah, and I would also say as to whether confidentiality can be maintained as opposed to may. It makes it stronger, doesn't change the meaning, makes it stronger. I also wonder, because 3/4 of the statement is about how we won't maintain confidentiality, and I wonder if that could be summarized into a point that says disclosure may be required as needed to comply with the law or with court, it's really external, subpoena or court order, something that simplifies this and says, look, we may have internally, the message is internally, we're going to protect your identity, but the courts may, something may
Compel us.
I think we could
That's a
probably,
great word, Will. May, unless we're compelled by court order to do it,
I think that's possible. We could sort of make this briefer and combine some of these numbered items into just as required by law, for example. That would encompass court ordered subpoenas. One thing we would be missing there, which I did include after thinking about it, want to raise for discussion with you all, is that I've added here that disclosures can be permitted to prevent or mitigate an imminent risk of harm to another person. That would not be legally required, but I do have concerns that you could have a whistleblower who's reporting something that's an imminent safety risk, and we need to warn someone that they're in physical peril. And that may not be legally required, but if I don't know that you would want to honor confidentiality of the whistleblower if you know that, sometime later today, someone's planning to harm someone.
You did it on that sounds like anonymous tip line, right? Someone's going to harm you, here's the tip line. Is there a reason we have to disclose the whistleblower if we want to just alert someone that their safety may be in danger? I heard it, right? So Jim is saying that I'm not sure why confidentiality.
Yeah, I guess to use my own words, Neil, if we are aware of a situation that someone's in harm, I believe we would take action independent of saying person A told me, right? I think but we have to do a threat assessment, right? That would require some questioning of that person if they're known, right?
We're talking about a huge possible range of facts and circumstances. That's why I just wanted to have a something in here that would protect you if a disclosure is needed. And I do take Bonnie's point. I can give this further thought, maybe bring it back, that in many cases, most cases perhaps, it's not necessary to identify the source of the information. It's just important to warn someone.
Yes.
But I could imagine, again, it's running through a huge range of factual scenarios. There could be circumstances where it's all an incredibly urgent emergency. Everything needs to be handled right away to avoid an imminent risk of harm. And everyone on staff is going to say, we need to have full disclosure to law enforcement, full disclosure to the possible victim. We don't want to be saddled by a commitment that's made in a policy that says we'll keep the person's identity. What if law enforcement tell you, we need to know the source of this information so we can go interview them immediately? I don't have time to get a subpoena. For example, that might be a circumstance where it would put staff in a very awkward position. Say, I'm sorry, board policy doesn't allow me to share the information that you were telling me is needed to keep someone safe. So I think we could think about it further. Perhaps I could reword this to note that, even in cases of potential imminent risk of harm, the identity of the whistleblower would be kept confidential to the maximum extent possible, et cetera, et cetera. We could probably try to strengthen that. And I could combine the other bullets into just as required by law, if that's helpful.
I think that would be great. That would be great. And I'm looking at your, that's fine, that'd be great.
So, Neil, or just to net the changes that you would be looking at is to, instead of listing out the specifics, you would summarize that more, however may be needed as required by law, or I don't know, by law includes being compelled, subpoenas, etc. So I don't know if we have to give the examples or not. Are you thinking that you would say, however, may be needed as required by law, and then it jumps down past that to saying, then before disclosing identity of person who reports an improper activity, we would then just continue on after that?
Yes, I think to Bonnie's point, this does kind of, it looks like a long list of ways that disclosures might be made. We can make it seem less daunting by combining 4 of the 5 into one bullet, and then I'll give a thought to adding some language to the preventing harm to be clear that that's really the last resort, and only if it's strictly necessary in the judgment of law enforcement or the superintendent or something like that to prevent the harm, that we would disclose the identity of the whistleblower as compared to just the substance of the concern.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the word compelled in this, because we're not doing it by choice. We're not choosing to do this. We're being required, right? So, all right, any other changes or recommendations, Bonnie, that you have?
I'm fine. And again, I say whether confidentiality may be maintained, I'd say can be maintained. I wanted to, the goal here is to say, if you have the courage to blow the whistle, then we're going to protect your confidentiality. And, we're going to bend over backwards to do that. That's the intent. So we want to say, this is, so I would, it just strengthens the language.
Fine with that change too.
Okay. Yeah, I just personally, I would like to see us move this forward. I mean, this will be the 4th reading of this, if you will, in forms. And I think it's very important to get it out to staff who's, watching this. So is it possible? Let me make this recommendation, because I personally would like to see this move forward. If you're comfortable, Bonnie, would you be comfortable with Neil, us approving this to move forward, and Neil sending out here's the recommended wording changes to the board, and that way we can move this forward?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I feel you understand what we're looking for, Neil, and these are changes for clarity versus, very specific actions. So with that, can we get a motion to move this to the board first? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Merrill.
Just seeking clarity over employee education, where it indicates schools will inform all employees of changes to the policy and the identity of the designated compliance officer. We don't really have that, but I wonder if it makes sense at this point to cross it over to the ombuds or list superintendent and or ombuds serve as compliance officers, something along that. Because right now, I don't necessarily have that designate.
No, designated employee.
Just back to who is it? Right.
So, yeah,
Correct.
yeah. So Dr. Merrill, this indicates you'll decide who that is, independent of if it's an ombudsman or someone else. I don't think this limits you to who it is. It's just who has the title, right? Just like we have for request for information, someone is assigned that role, if you will. I just want to make sure, Neil, I'm not reading this incorrectly. It isn't a specific role within the district. It is whoever you deem will have that role. So you could pick anybody and now they become that based on your recommendation. So when we bring the ombudsman's coming, if you chose that person to be the compliance officer, then they are. We wouldn't have to explicitly list it in there because that's who you choose as your delegate. Or are you looking for something more?
I'm just asking whether you would like it a little tighter and to knit it into your ombuds position. It seems to make sense to me, but your call.
Well, so the reason I'm giving a little push, Dr. Merrill, is I'm worried because in the whistleblower scenario, we've explicitly said the ombuds would not do investigation. And given this is a whistleblower, it seems like they would be required to do some investigation. So and maybe the person would go to the ombuds and talk about the situation and they say, oh yeah, you need to go, you should report this, right? They may say you should do it, but that's my only concern, just thinking off the cuff of that role versus the whistleblower. That person has to make a decision based on some information to say, yes, this should move forward or not. But that's my interpretation. Neil, am I off on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think my thought would be, first of all, I agree, Mr. Atherton, that the policy language we have now allows the superintendent to select anyone to be the compliance officer. It's really the superintendent's decision who that is. And then with the ombuds, we could give further thought whether the ombuds would be an appropriate compliance officer, but you don't have an ombuds yet. So if we change compliance officer to ombuds, that makes this part of the policy inoperative until you fill that position. So it might be good to leave this as for now, and we can always revisit and change it if it seems to be a natural fit for the ombuds role. But I think Mr. Atherton makes a good point.
I think, Will, you
wanna
convince me?
Hold on, Bonnie. Go ahead, Dr. Merrill.
Will, you convince me that we don't want to contaminate what you're doing with the ombuds role? So I would draw that thought and just leave the language at my discretion. It's cleaner that way. So I get it. Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Merrill. Bonnie?
I just want to add that because, we talked about this last time, but, this is really more about financial and management controls. So, which is ombudsman is more about HR kinds of things. And so my inclination would be for this, absence of any other information, for the CFO to be the compliance officer, unless we had a separate compliance officer. But that's kind of where this role naturally fits, as opposed to the ombudsman is really looking at, it's very different substantively to me. So I'd not be inclined to make them the same, but it's your discretion. It's the superintendent's discretion.
All right. All right, so can we get a motion to move this forward to the board for first reading, and Neil will send out the updates to us prior to that?
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Aye. All right, motion carries. With this will go to the board for first reading. Thanks, everybody, for all the hard work on this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
All right, policy 8705, contract administration.
So I have I like doing this. I had one thing I'd like to add to it. And I'd like to add, fundamentally, and Neil, you allude to it, but fundamentally under the policy, I can approve a $50,000 or $40,000, $5,000 contract every day without, and so I would like to link this to the budget and say that any contracts would need to also be signed off by the CFO to assure that, to verify that the funds have been budgeted. And if the funds have not been budgeted, and that means it would be coming out of something like lapsed salaries or the fund balance, then I'd like it to go to the board. It kind of follows the same structure that we're using for stipends. But if the contract's not budgeted, I want it to come to the board. And if it's budgeted, I just want a sign off from the CFO. And it protects the CFO, right? It says, hey, the superintendent can do this, but somebody else has to sign off on it. So it's kind of a control to have to require two people to approve it, not just one.
Right.
Takes unilateral authority away from the superintendent.
I think, Bonnie, that's a great suggestion. I think you already covered here in the sentence towards the bottom of the first page. It's a freestanding one sentence paragraph. All system level service contracts must be, well, actually, maybe that's too limited, but let me read the sentence. All system level service contracts must be pre-audited by the finance officer before they are executed. So it is state law. It's state law that there cannot be any contracts that obligate the expenditure of school system funds unless the finance officer, Rhonda Rath, has certified that funds are budgeted and available for that fiscal year. That's state law. That's what this sentence is getting at. It does say system level service contracts. That really should be any contract requiring the expenditure of funds. Would that address your concern if we just revise that?
I would say, is it okay to say that it, because I'm concerned about things that are not budgeted. And we have a habit of using lapsed salaries and other things and that's gotten us into trouble. So, and again, my goal here is to protect the CFO, who you all love to remind me that the CFO doesn't have a contract. So I just want to give the CFO the authority to say, no, we don't have budget for this. So.
Yeah,
So I'd like it to be explicit to say it must be pre-audited by the finance officer. I don't mean to assure that we have that the funds are budgeted. And if the funds are not budgeted and the choices to use an alternative funding source like lapsed salaries, or I don't know what to call this, so it's a discretionary funding source like lapsed salaries, or then the board will be notified. And only because we've been doing that. I don't know if we've done it with service contracts, but we've been using lapsed salaries pretty liberally. So
Neil, I believe there's already a policy that covers that. I'm trying to look for it. There was a local controls policy. I don't see it right this second, but it explicitly, what I remember from that policy, that any position that is open prior to those funds being used for any other purpose, board approval is required for that. And I don't know off the top of my head. I can't remember it. It's a local policy, and it was specific for the case of where a a position is open and those funds want to be used for something else and it requires board approval. I haven't found it yet.
You're saying that we have a policy that says lapsed salaries that
It- it-
controls these
it-
salaries?
Yeah, it doesn't say lapsed salaries. It says positions that are open, those funding, which is i.e.
Lapsed
lapsed
salary.
salary.
That's lapsed salary. So yeah, well, then we haven't been enforcing that
Oh,
either.
position control. I believe it's policy 8301. Continuing positions, temporary vacant positions. Is it possible, Franklin, for you to open up policy 8301 and look at that?
Done.
Okay, if you go down to D, you see vacant policies. Bonnie, if you read that and tell me what you think.
This is about positions, though, not about contracts.
No. But if, to your original point, is if you're going to take money from lapsed salaries to pay for a contract, this applies.
I don't see that.
So it says, if a continuing position becomes vacant, the superintendent consultants with the chief resource officer and chief financial officer may elect to do any of the following. 1, hold the funds of the vacant positions in abeyance. 2, recommend the funds of the positions be reallocated subject to the following requirements below. With specific notice to the board of a proposed reallocation of fund, the superintendent may reallocate the funds from a vacant position to other central services previously approved by the
Other central
board.
services positions, right? Beginning,
Till the end of the
so
current.
it's only about allocating it to other positions. It's not about allocating it for contracts or other services. And we went to the trouble of doing all of this for stipends. I just wonder if we should do it for contracts. I just want something, I want the CFO to say, we have the budget for this. And if we don't have the budget for it, then it would be, we would go to.
So
I would
that is our,
modify this.
yeah, and that's already state law, Ms. Hauser, just to be clear, that the
I
pre-audit
hear you.
statute,
I hear
so, and it's already, the policy says that the contract shall be pre-audited, which means, and you can confirm with Rhonda, she looks at every contract to confirm that funds are budgeted and available to cover the contract expenditures. Otherwise, she won't approve it. In fact, we have a routing sheet now for contracts, so that there's sign off by department heads. Rhonda personally signs off each on routing sheets to confirm funds are budgeted and available. And then I review.
hear you. I expect that. I expect that to be, somehow we've gotten into some trouble on this. And again, I just, and the words pre-audited, just so you know, those words don't mean anything to me. I mean, they're very vague. And so I just want very specifically that something that authorizes the CFO, it puts the responsibility on the CFO to say the funds are available. That's all. That the budget.
If you like, I could take a whack at sort of rephrasing, but I can assure you it's incredible. It's perfectly clear to anyone in finance what pre-audit is. That's every finance officer in the state knows exactly what that means. It's what I just described. What you're asking for. We could change the wording to sort of explain that to a layperson, I suppose, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
That's what I'm asking. That's what the policies are for, right? It's for the lay people. I mean, there's so many things that anyway. And it's just pre-ordered by the financial including confirming that funds are available. And the question, or the funds are included in the budget, not the funds are included in the budget. And if the contract requires the use of lapsed salary, and we already do this with the fund balance, But if the contract requires the use of lapsed salaries, then it will be brought to the board.
Yeah, I'd rather have that wording modified in 8301 to not include other positions, but other purposes. In other words, instead of just saying positions, have 8301 brought to us and modified the wording to include or additional items such as contracts, etc. So that way it's not just you're repurposing it for another position, but you could be repurposing it for other purposes, like you're saying, Bonnie. And that way
So-
vacant positions are covered.
Yeah, well, we can do that. I actually have a really different idea, and I was gonna talk to Rhonda and Dr. Merrill about it on Monday, because I would like policy on use of lapsed salaries. And but I don't want to, if you want, I'll tell you kind of what I'm thinking, but it's none of this.
So
And it's kind of essentially that lapsed salary stays with the organization with the open position.
So again, Bonnie, vacant positions is lapsed salaries in that position, or the 8301 position control is intended for that purpose. The vacant
it's
position is
reversed.
lapsed salaries.
So right now, if Eflin Cheeks has an open position, the funds go to the district.
Right now,
It's
I would say it differently. Right now, it's to the superintendent's discretion what occurs with that funding while that position is open. And
Yep.
we specify in here that if the superintendent chooses to do something with those funds that isn't for the original purpose, it would come to the board for a position. I'm recommending we add or contract to cover or any other purpose, then it would come to the board for any reason that would cover both.
okay, well, I prefer to put it here because the topic of this policy is contracts.
But
You know what I
it's
mean? So it's not position. The other policy is about position, just about contracts, and all I want to know, because right now we have no controls, and I know I spoke to Hill about this when they were here, because I don't like the idea that the superintendent has the authority to just approve an endless number of 50,000 of contracts below $50,000. That is poor management and poor control to me. We could have $5 million of $50,000 contracts under this policy.
yeah,
So I
but
just want something that says it's subject to budget. That if it's budgeted, it's fine with me. If
so
it's
Bonnie,
not budgeted, I want a tighter control on it.
yeah, so Bonnie, I don't have an issue with putting the word budget. My concern is adding wording that talks about lapsed salaries and vacant positions when there's another policy that covers that. I don't
Yeah, and
have
I'm
any
not
issue with
suggesting that. I'm not
Okay.
suggesting that. I'm suggesting that the finance officer has to affirm that the funds are budgeted, are in the current budget. And, I don't know if we don't have a policy on lapsed salaries. I was just suggesting, and I don't need to re-explain lapsed salaries, but if we're using an alternative source that's not the budget, and the only one I know of is lapsed salary, I don't know if there's others.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't agree. We do have a lapsed salary policy. We just need to modify it to include using those funds for other sources other than positions, because it originally came up, that policy came about because repurposing money for other positions. And now you're giving a different scenario, which is using those for contracts. And I'm just suggesting taking the existing policy that covers lapsed salaries and adding that specific condition.
The position control description, you want to use a position control policy to include how we use lapsed salaries for contracts.
Well,
It's not intuitive to me, but I
So
hear what you're saying.
it explicitly has section D that says vacant position, i.e. lapsed salaries. And yeah,
It
thank
doesn't
you.
say lapsed salaries. It doesn't use that language.
But vacant position is a lapsed salary. by definition. There's nobody there. That is a
I'm just
position we
trying
have
to
open.
be- I'm trying to avoid technical terms and trying to be very transparent about it, that's all. This
Okay,
is
I
about
mean,
position control, it's not about, it's about position control, and it's about controlling positions and hire, and this is really about controlling positions. Lap salary is one of the many consequences of open positions. But, so if we could put something here too, I just want to give the CFO some, support. If he or she decides that this needs to go to the board.
yeah,
The person works for the superintendent. So, and they don't have a contract, so I just want to give them some leeway and some authority.
yeah. So Bonnie,
That's-
just to restate the items. One is coming to this policy to, under vacant positions, to bring it back to include not just reallocating lap salaries to other positions, but for other purposes would come to the board. And that would cover any lap salaries being utilized for anything else other than the position it was intended. Then
Okay.
on the other side, your request for the 8705 would be the additional clarity wording that the CFO will confirm that there is budget to cover the items for the 50,000.
The funds are budgeted, and if they're not, that they will bring it to the attention of the board. Now, lap salaries, would you count that as a budget? Don't consider that a budgeted item.
No, well, think of it this way. If the item was to use lap salaries, then that falls under 8301, which would say you have to bring it to the board. So it's
83.
covered either way. I just don't want to cross-reference this to where we were talking about you have to update in so many places.
I agree. I just want to be clear that if you have a service contract and it's that the finance officer has to confirm to the board that it's in the budget, and if it's not, then it comes to the board. Even if it's under $50,000, if it's not, it goes to the board.
Yeah, just a little wording difference on what you said, Bonnie. I, as a board member, don't want to go be approving all $50,000 contracts. I think the superintendent should do that within their budget. And the only time we would need that is if there is something that's needed that isn't in budget and we need other funding sources for it.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yes, I think we are. I just, the wording of what you said, I just want to make sure I as a board member don't need to see that level of detail on.
We don't want to
budget.
see the 50,000, but we don't know, but the idea of the superintendent has the authority to approve an endless number of contracts below $50,000 is not controlled. So there needs to be some limit. So it's already in. So let's say it's in CNI decides to buy a new piece of software and it's or a new curriculum piece, and it's in their budget to do that, then they can do that. But if it's not in anybody's budget, then it has to come to then I can think of several examples. I think
Yeah,
who's
Bonnie,
that communication company that we were using?
yeah, I just want to highlight if it was curriculum, it would be over 50,000. It would come to the board, right?
Oh, that's not the point.
Yeah,
That's not the point. The point is that I can do $150,000 contracts and break the bank. And this policy, the way it's written, doesn't stop that.
So let me
Go ahead,
offer
Dr.
some
Nero.
current practice. You're talking about whether it's in the budget. During the course of the year, we might come up with a contract that specifically wasn't budgeted for, but there's a code that has funds behind it that enables that contract to be let. Rhonda's pre-audit. So when someone submits a contract, no matter the amount, They must provide the code they intend to use, which is in their budget. The pre-audit, Rhonda looks behind the code to see if funds are available, including future encumbrances. That's the check and balance. If you had a runaway train last year, and maybe you did, and that led to the March throwdown, currently this superintendent and finance officer don't operate that way. If they've overspent that code, they're done. And if they need an exception, then we've got to move money from somewhere else, which is a budget, and it's already in the budget. Otherwise, we'd be coming. I am very uncomfortable even referring to spending lapse salary and fund balance during the course of an operating budget during the course of a year. And Bonnie, you and I can maybe get to that in this 8301 or other things when we meet on Monday. We can add language if you wish that simply says, and part of the pre-audit process assures that existing funds are available to support authorizing a contract. And that is the role of the finance officer.
I would like to say existing funds are available in the budget. To your point, Jim, because you're saying, you as a superintendent would not use lapse salaries or fund balance. That's not been the case in the past. So just want to say but that's all. I would just like to say that it's in the budgets. That
Right. I just want to highlight, Bonnie, you just said fund balance. The superintendent cannot spend money out of the fund balance. It must come to the board.
I
to
understand.
allocate it.
I understand.
Yeah.
Understand. I've said that several times now.
Yeah.
We know
Okay.
that we have tight
Hang
controls.
on a bit.
We have tight controls over the use of fund balance. We
Yes.
don't have the same tight control over the use of, and there's a lot of blurring of last year, Jim, just so you know, we had $2 million in lapse salaries. It's a lot of money. So
Where are
that's
we?
all.
Will?
Yeah, we
I
need
just want
to,
to say that this contract thing is subject to budget controls. That's fine for me to just leave it there.
You do get a quarterly summary, which we just brought to you, of all service contracts under 50,000.
yes.
And I have scrutinized the last batch to see how close anyone's playing the game and authorizing contracts between $45,000 and $50,000.
Yep.
And so I'm watching to see whether that's being played. Lately, I've gotten contracts for $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 for interpretation services. So our processes are consistent no matter the amount. So there may be more at work behind the scenes than board members realize in terms of the scrutiny we're providing and the thresholds. I mean, you can always lower the threshold, which slows the
No,
wheels.
no,
I just
No.
want to know
no.
that this contract is in somebody's budget and we approved a budget, right? And remember, we don't know much about what's
We don't
below
approve
but
it
we,
unless there's a budget.
Yeah,
We don't
so
approve it.
right, that's all I'm trying to get to.
yeah, so I need to move us along. I know, Neil, you've said that the wording, that's the common accepted wording in the practice is there. If we can add what Bonnie has requested, which just gives the layman terms in there,
Yep.
I think we're good to go forward, and we'll bring back 8301 to just add that clarity around lapse salaries. And I think it will cover the scenario that Bonnie's asking about. And Dr. Merrill, I just want to say, I don't want anything less than that. I am comfortable with it, and I appreciate your feedback on some of the details there, but I am not interested in lowering that for any reason. I think with the budget and the process that we've got a way to manage that. So Bonnie, do you need to see that wording prior where we want to hold this up? Or
I think no, I think it's fine. I think it's a really simple change. I'm surprised I think it's a simple change. At some point, we may have to explain. Jim, you said something that I don't know we have encoded in policy that says the budget is the budget and that lapse salaries is not part of the budget. that lap salary and fund, we have very tight controls over fund balance, but we don't have it over lap salaries. That's really where my concern is, but that's fine with me to just say service contract to be pre-audited by the finance officer, including assurances that the funds are available in the approved budget.
Are you okay with that, Neil?
Yeah, if I can just give a little thought to the exact wording and make the edit, I do think the pre-audit procedure, which is statutorily required, I think addresses Bonnie's concern. I mean, I think that those protections are already there. Rhonda understands them very well. And I think we can spell that out in layman's terms, what a pre-audit is. And then the question is, do you want to come back to policy committee or go to the full
No,
board?
we don't want to explain what a
Okay.
pre-audit is. We want to say that the budget is that it's compliant with
that's the
budget.
pre-audit
We
process.
just want to say the budget,
Right.
and
I
this
can
is for,
Well,
That's
Bonnie,
all.
I think y'all are talking past each other. Neil is saying that the pre-audits by that statement means that. And I think I'm perfectly okay with putting layman's terms around that pre-audit means that funds are available and have been verified. I don't have an issue with that because you're right. Someone that doesn't know what pre-audit means can read this and understand what that means and be comfortable in it. So I don't have a problem with adding that clarity in there.
And I can email to the full board with the edits in advance, as we're doing with at least one other policy. So you have time to think about it before your next meeting. And then if we need discussion at the board meeting, we can have it then. I do think we can address that concern fairly easily. I did want to also, unless there's further discussion on this, I want to sort of explain what the edits here are too.
Sure.
If that's okay. So the only changes that we made, this is actually initiated by me in consultation with Dr. Merrill, because as awareness of this policy has increased, we're getting a kind of a flood of contracts for legal review. What your policy currently provides is that contracts over $50,000 need to be reviewed by the attorney, and contracts that are not on a board attorney approved form need to be approved by the board attorney. And what we found is that when you really are very carefully applying that second prong, what it means is I'm reviewing a lot of $5,000 contracts or $1,000 contracts, and often in situations where it's not on a standard form, because they can't be. A lot of these are subscription agreements with online service providers. And so rather than slow down the process and increase your legal fees by requiring legal review of every non-standard contract, no matter dollar amount, what we would do here is I would provide written guidance to staff for contracts under $50,000 with non-negotiables. Here are some terms that are illegal in North Carolina that you can never agree to. Here are some best practices. Here are some standard terms. Staff would have the ability to work through the contracts that are under $50,000, and the superintendent or designee could send any contract to us for legal review at any time if there are additional concerns. But basically, it's up to you. I don't mind reviewing all these contracts. It's just that I think your legal fees are going to be spiking a little bit, and I question whether it's worth me spending 30 minutes or an hour on a $2,000 contract.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Neil. I guess one of the questions I had is recurring contracts, because sometimes we've had instances where we have contracts, we're just renewing a contract, or we had it with the Hill Group where we had a contract with them, and we didn't use the contract that we already had. And so we want to the extent possible, if we've gone through the trouble of putting a contract in place, we want to reuse it as often as we can, as opposed to having it, right? That's the safest way and I think people are afraid now, right? Isn't that what we're struggling with? People are afraid given what happened last year.
And so, Bonnie, just for clarity, that what we have in this proposed language is that, first of all, contracts can't be divided for this specific intent to avoid board approval. Dr. Merrill's, monitoring that as he's already noted. So you can't say, here's part one of the contract for $45,000, and then 2 months later we'll execute part two. That would violate the policy. We've also said that extensions and renewals count in terms of determining the dollar amount threshold. So if the contract is for $10,000 with 5 one-year renewal options, that's a $60,000 contract that needs to come to the board. So I think we've tried to be very careful about the wording here to make sure that that the board still has tight control. It's just simply to not send everything to the lawyers, for these small dollar contracts.
And my question is strictly procedural, is again, if, you said you're getting everything. And so it's procedural, and I'm just inviting you to say, to make this easier for the staff, if it's a renewal of a contract that we've already signed and reviewed, then have it, I mean, like, how do we alleviate some of the concerns of the staff? To say you don't need the lawyer to review a contract that you've been entering into for the last 3 years.
So in the summer, when we stopped all contracts, I had a meeting with all the director level folks who had authority to bring forward contracts. And we really stopped the presses. We slammed down hard. And so the pendulum swung all the other way to where we were being overly cautious, locking everything down tight. Needed to go back to ground zero. Now we're starting to bring it back up to a more reasonable level, which is what Neil and I are working on. But if a contract doesn't change except for the date, a dollar amount that goes up $1,000 and a different signature, we're moving that through. We don't need legal. And so we had caught them in, let's get them on the legal form also, and that was creating a roadblock. So we're cleaning that up. So just systemically, as you look
That's
at
exactly.
we're recalibrating where we need to be, and I think we're getting better and getting there.
Right. And just
Yeah.
one final point of clarity on this, Bonnie, since you've asked about it, is, and this is based in part on a brief conversation I had with Mr. Atherton. We did think about renewals and want to not to ease, contract renewals. It's already been reviewed by attorneys. Then, why send it back for additional review? But the exception would be if the renewal is if the renewal was executed within 2 years of the original contract, then it would come back to the board. So that, for example, and the theory that there is, again, to discourage this idea of splitting the contract in two. So if there's a $50,000 contract, or let's say $45,000 contract, and then a $45,000 renewal of the contract that's executed just a year later, that really feels like a $90,000 contract potentially. And so the idea is, if it's been more than 2 years since the original contract and was executed and we want to renew it, then that does not require additional legal review. But this is all.
Yeah, I understood that. I
Okay.
understood all that. I was
Great.
just literally trying to say, how can we alleviate the need to I think Jim explained it. We just don't want to have legally review something that we've been doing for years and it works. Right? If contracts that are working, they should be able to sail through. So it sounds like we're doing that. So I'm good.
All right, so can we get a motion to approve with Bonnie, your change, and Neil will send it out prior to the board for first reading?
Motion to approve.
Second, all in favor? Aye. All right, goes to first reading. All right, the next item is more of an update to us on stakeholder feedback. Kevin, are you taking us through that?
I can do that. Franklin, do you want to go ahead and open the two documents that are in Assembly there for us? So when we last met and discussed this topic, we had informed the board and the committee that we were going to start with an invitation extended by the Equity Task Force, and we were able to road test our presentation. Dr. Green, Mariah Morris, Dr. Dreyer, Mr. Williams, myself, all were part of this process, and it was, I think, illuminating for everyone. We learned some things about the technical aspects of how to deliver this presentation in real time. This was a fully remote meeting, but that allowed us the opportunity to open up that second document that Franklin has, which is the, we used a Jamboard, which was a new process for most people. I think, zooming in a little bit will help Franklin to see some of the details. And anyone who wants to know more about this granular level of feedback that we got from a couple dozen people at the Equity Task Force level, we facilitated group discussions after taking them through a brief introduction of where policy stands today and where the board has latitude to direct future policy decisions specifically around family engagement and family involvement, policy 1310, as was alluded to earlier today. But Neil Ramey has also been very helpful in alerting us to two areas. Number one, the general statute that calls on the board to develop future policies, to develop or adopt or adapt policies in consultation with parents, teachers, administrators, and community members is broad. So that the plan that we brought to you definitely was a theoretical maximum. So all the dates and the potential inputs from back in September 25th, those were, right, that was kind of a maximal view of what might be feasible. The good news is all of those definitely applied to the standard. And then there's also the fact that policy 1310 is not the only place where this level of involvement and input from community members will have some impact. And by community members, again, we're thinking broadly, all the people who can share input. So we let everyone know that we put a survey out to the Equity Task Force members that night, and it's also on our webpage. Franklin, I'm going to keep riding this train as long as we've got it. If you can go to the homepage of the website, let's show folks kind of what we're doing. If you go to the page that says Parents' Rights for Their Child's Education, I think this is a really good way for us to demonstrate for everyone how open and public this process is. At the very top of that page, the Board of Education is soliciting feedback, welcomes feedback, and the link to the survey. We can increase the font size to make it as large as possible, put a blinking red light around it. We can do all kinds of things, but we will be sending this by mass notification to all families, and that survey has begun to receive responses. We've also reached out to community partners. We're starting with the United Voices of Effluent Cheeks. We're awaiting a response from UVEC and the community center, the Effluent Cheeks Community Center, for one of our first community level meetings. Again, we've brought up in this space and in our community engagement committee numerous times, so Ms. Hauser, you will have been party to a lot of this, that we have a lot of interlocking and overlapping relationships, and making sure that what we're doing suits the needs of and takes into account the relationships of schools, community partners, families, and so on is very important to us. Dr. Green had leveled this up in our discussions, and we want to make absolutely sure that everything we do will take us forward. We are doing this to build and enhance relationships. And so we will report back regularly on the status of those meetings as they come onto the calendar and as we get more feedback to support the board. We were looking at November, mid-November, as a theoretical end date for gathering this feedback. And I think, Neil, it would be important from a process perspective to understand what you think about the amount of meeting time and the number of meetings that we have for the policy committee and the board in order to meet the December 15th or January 1st deadlines. Again, for anybody who hasn't already referred to this, there's material in our September 25th presentation to the board that details the deadlines that were spelled out in the state budget and other caps that we're bearing in mind to make sure that we're serving the board's purposes, but also complying with state law.
Yeah, I can address that briefly, Kevin. Thank you. We are on a tight timeline here. The statutory deadlines are for most of these policy revisions that will be reflected in 1310. The deadline is January 1 for adoption of policies. In some cases, though, there's a December 15 deadline for the adoption of the policies with a January 1 deadline for implementation. So I think we should really, to be on the safe side, we should take the position that December 15 is our deadline for board adoption of policies to increase family parental engagement and involvement in the schools. And I do want to say just very briefly, I really commend staff for the work on this. Kevin did not share that. I told him on the phone, the statute doesn't say how much consultation you need to do. I mean, in my view, you could get together a group of parents and a group of administrators and talk to them for an hour or two, and that would be good faith compliance. This is much more than that minimum. And I think it really reflects a sincere desire to get helpful involvement, engagement from the stakeholders. So I think it's an excellent plan. I've shared it with other clients. But yeah, on the timeline, normally we're looking at 2 board meetings, policy committee, and then referral to 2 board meetings. The board can waive second reading. So that could save us a month if the board's prepared to do that. But these are, meaty policies. So I'm not sure, I'll defer to you all in terms of what's a realistic schedule for policy committee and board meeting review. We can always schedule a special meeting. We can waive second reading. Those are ways we can kind of speed things along, but we do have to shoot to get this all done by December 15th.
Yep. All right. The one question I had about the feedback, Kevin, is one, I appreciate all the data. One of them caught my eye. Well, several of them did, but one I'll highlight is there was one specific about EC families, and the wording of it was, creative solutions are offered. There's no time, energy, or resources to implement. That caught my eye for a couple of reasons. One is we were starting an initiative of a SNAC committee, a special needs committee that was being brought up slowly. And I know it was on our list of committees. Definitely would like to make sure these go to those appropriate areas. And then the second, I was just going to bring up, Dr. Merrill, that this SNAC initiative was started a couple of years ago to see if Orange County could do something similar. And there were some parents brought on, and it was more informal. And I know there was definitely a lot of interest from the board to put an official SNAC process to address kind of what this person was talking about. But I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And possibly, I think, Bonnie, you were requested to be on that committee as well, weren't you?
On SNAC?
On SNAC, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but
Yeah, I know it was myself and one other person that requested that, but we haven't seen any meetings on that. So I'm just highlighting that would be something good. I see Mr. Williams is on the call. Go ahead.
Hey, good. Yep, still morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So the comment actually came from SNAC. What happens is now SNAC is also part of the Equity Task Force meeting, so it's encompassed in a whole, so it's not separate. So, and I will follow up to make sure I'm not completely far off, but our EC department sent the meeting out in the SNAC group to say that it was now going to be on this Monday and meeting in line with the Equity Task Force. So you have the Equity Task Force, SNAC, and AIG committee that meet all Monday in this under this umbrella, so it's not a divide. So it sounds like what I'm hearing, Mr. Atherton, is the communication did not go out broadly enough to everyone. So I will make sure that happens. But SNAC is alive and vibrant. It's a part of the ETF, and then we break apart into sort of group committee meetings, and those who are wanting to participate in SNAC go and meet with our EC staff, but all of it's related within the Equity Task Force, if that helps.
Yeah, it does. One of the intentions originally was to bring forward policies and guidelines around SNAC, and definitely would like to see that continue on from being the idea and now coming to fruition, some things around that, so others will know that, hey, Orange County is committed to this. Here's kind of the guidelines and rules and policies around that. So I'm definitely interested in that. And like I said, I know there's one other board member. I can't recall off the top of my head who it is, but I know we would definitely love to be part of that and help shepherd that to the next stage of whatever that would be. So thank you.
Okay, I'll make sure Ms. Connie Crimmins reaches out to you next meeting.
And
we'll make sure you find out.
to tie it back to this discussion, we had agreed through November 10th to keep the window open for facilitating those kinds of conversations, and we'll give you an update.
Okay, excellent.
so I just have a couple of questions. First of all, I don't remember, and I may have missed it, but can we get the survey, a copy of the survey that's going out? I don't remember seeing it.
It's on the website. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I mean, so all right, I'll look for it. And
We've gotten a lot of feedback and observed our data that says that if surveys are too long, people will not complete them. So we made this a 1-question survey.
okay. I just want to just say that the whole effort is daunting to me. You know, it's daunting. There's just like so much involved, and I don't know how. So the survey won't answer a lot of the questions that are in the policy. So on one hand, I'm all in favor of getting out, not just, United Voices has, depending on how you ask, will affect who shows up. But I'm thinking about the PTOs, the social workers, the family liaisons, and other groups that are hard to engage. But again, what do we want from them? Because if I look through the policy, I can imagine outlining changes that we can suggest and give people a chance to react. But
thank you. If I can respond, excuse me, if I can respond to that in terms of the policy here, in setting up the questions, the Jamboard, the topics there align to the items that are required in the policy. So we were hoping to gather our intent to gather some information that will support. There were about 9 different items that we combined together into the 4 general topics so that parents can give feedback based on their own experience, successes and barriers, as well as feedback around ideas. So when you look at the content, there's a page for parent feedback, a page for, excuse me, a page for instructional materials, a page for reproductive health programs, and those topics align with the required elements that should be in the policy. We also wanted parents to feel that the intent of this is beyond just the policy. It's looking at parent engagement in general. So what, as a system, we take from the feedback we gather that speaks to programs, activities, procedures that we might want to put in place beyond just the revision to policy 1310.
I'll just
Great.
close by saying this. I know we're trying to be mindful of the time on this committee agenda. The board has a legal requirement to make changes in consultation with all of these groups by January 1st. There's no reason why the board can't continue to engage in dialogue and continue looking at this policy after January 1st.
Right.
So I want us to be mindful of that as we go forward.
okay, I'm just trying to see if we're getting to our hard to reach populations, and again, the PTOs are a good representative of the schools, but the social workers and the family liaisons are really the ones that are dealing every day with populations that we don't normally reach.
I will tie up that bow. You can imagine that Mrs. Blefko and I have talked on more than one occasion about how to make sure that we're reaching groups like that, as well as with Dr. Dreyer and Mariah Morris, who have been part of our working group meetings in the shop here. So we definitely plan to bring back some good information on that. And again, I don't think we see January 1st as the end of anything except addressing a legal deadline that was spelled out in the state budget.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much for the update on that. Next, we just have a few minutes left. We have several items left, which we will not be able to cover. Dr. Merrill, is there one that you would like to cover next over others that you feel is a priority, or to try to have some discussions? We only have 6 minutes left. I don't want to rush any of it, and we can obviously call another meeting to go through these. But is there something that is recommended to start the discussion at least now, or what makes sense? I don't want to start a discussion that we feel like would be more productive to have a longer conversation on these, and I want to be respectful for everybody's time, because we all have other commitments as well today.
I had to reboot because I was on battery power. Were you asking me?
Yes,
think you were. I thought I heard my
yeah,
name.
yes, Dr. Merrill. I just wanted to see if
I
there's
heard it.
anything. My preference is not to go, I mean, each one of these
It-
or
I
have
agree.
significant content. So I'd recommend us calling a separate meeting to cover these, unless you feel differently.
No, I agree that they're related, but they're heavy and they will require time. And
Okay,
there's no point really in us trying to get to it right now. Scheduling a special time for this makes sense to me. You know, we're going to be loading the board up a lot in the next couple of months.
yep,
We got student achievement's going to set up a nighttime meeting. I know finance, budget, capital is going to probably be doing the same, but we can fold this in. So yeah, I would say we stop now, but try and get to these when we can.
okay, okay. Bonnie, are you okay with that as well?
Yeah, I'm fine. I wanted to thank Neil for I thought the work on the gender support policies was really well done. So I would go, I'm ready to go forward with that. I have no comments on that. I was very impressed.
I do have just one item on that, Bonnie, that I think the district needs to define what the notifications methods are. Because it's
Okay.
mentioned many, many times in there, and we have many different people in our district. And I think us as a district need to give guidance to who's going to do the notification and how it's done. And I think it needs to be put in there. So I definitely want to have that discussion or a recommendation when we have that discussion on how we're going to do that as a district, given that's
Okay.
a key wording throughout it.
Yep. Good point.
All right. So I will put these on another special meeting we'll have to cover those 3 items, and we may have the modifications for the other policies that we'll put underneath if time permits for that special meeting. So for next action items, next steps, Franklin, do you have our list?
Yes, so going back through here, 8705 is motion to first read. Did I catch in there that 8301 needs to come back to committee as well?
Yes, 8301 needs to come back with the modifications for other uses in open positions.
But that comes to committee or goes to board?
Committee, it
Got
needs
it.
to come since it hasn't been modified.
Got it. And then I got 1740 approval to first read, 1730 back to committee, 1510 back to committee, 1610 approval to first read, a consensus to remove the 1510 regulation, 1320 back to committee, 1100 back to committee. And then I hearing correctly, policy 4300, regulation 4300 and regulation 1710 are all on track for a special called policy meeting.
Yes, and I didn't hear this one, Franklin, but 1761 for first reading.
Correct, 1761 for first reading. Yes, I skipped over that. Got it.
That's okay. All right. With no other business, anything else, Dr. Merrill? All right. With that, can we get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday.
Thank you all.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.